Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Rangers Review Weekend Edition. We are back. I'm joined here by Josh in the studio. Josh, midway through an international break, how are you finding it so far?
Fine.
Yeah.
Fine. There's been too many of them. Fine. I always think it'll be a little bit less quieter, and it is to a degree. But I think there's so much kind of interest in how Danny Rule can actually do over the next few months. He's got a couple of winnable games, as much as I hate that phrase.
Yeah.
What about you?
Yeah,
Right.
not bad, not bad. I said in the pod in the week I always maybe struggle to get as excited about international football as I do about Rangers, but I do think it is always nice to have a little bit of a change of pace and just for everyone to catch their collective breaths a little bit before we get back to the in and outs of Rangers every single week. And before we get into our talking point today that I know that Josh you're very excited about, we have had a lot of messages about these very fetching Rangers Review mugs that adorn the table here on the weekend podcast. And we know with Christmas coming up, I will stick a link in the bio where you can purchase your very own Rangers Review mug. You can just be like me and Josh here. I don't think anyone has ever said that in their life. They want to be more like us, to be honest.
Yeah.
But they are the perfect stocking filler. I believe that's what you call it.
I'm going to get my dad one.
Yeah. Perfect.
And I don't know if he'll use it, but it's the thought that counts.
Absolutely. Rangers Review, what better could you think of opening on Christmas morning? But enough about what we're trying to plug. Let's get on to what we're talking about today. And I know this is something you've wanted to talk for a little while, Josh. It's all about set pieces. And this is off the back of the news that we brought you in the week on the Rangers Review that Rangers are exploring the idea of bringing in a set piece coach to Danny Rowe's backroom team. So I guess I really want to start with asking why are so many elite teams across Europe, across the continent, adding set piece coaches and making them quite a focal point in backroom teams across Europe?
Well, if I was to ask you, so after 5 Premiership match days, English Premiership that is, what percentage of goals were set pieces within those 5 match days?
Oh,
what would you think?
10% maybe?
25.
Wow, 25. That's a quarter of all goals.
Quarter of all goals.
After 5 games in the English Premier League, are scored from set pieces.
Yeah, so if anyone's been watching Match of the Day and or consumes football content outside of Scotland, football is becoming more direct. It seems it's becoming, Thomas Frank at Tottenham, Arteta, Arsenal, long throws are back. So set pieces is not a new trend, but it's becoming very vogue. And the reason why is data. Football is becoming more of a business. Similarly to recruitment, you want to exploit as many margins as possible. If football is run like a business, then you need to look at the underlying numbers for everything and not just play on emotion. When data first started to influence football, it was found that only like 2% of goals, 2% of the goals scored by a team on average were from set pieces. So what do teams do? They go, there's no point spending, an hour doing loads of training. Not all teams, but generally the elite clubs, they'd look to find their margins elsewhere in their recruitment and attack and play and defending.
Yeah, that's actually a stat that I think a lot of people would be quite amazed by, because I think that you look back as a football as a whole over 50, 60 years, then everyone would think, set piece, great chance to score. Yeah. But when you actually break it down, the goals weren't coming from that so much.
Not that many. And that's why a lot, you see, there was a real rise in Mark Warburton in short corners, because it was about, right, let's get the ball back and play, because that gives us a better chance of scoring than set pieces. So what teams like Arsenal have done, and Aston Villa and many others, every set piece, every Premier League club will have a designated set piece coach, whether they are officially or whether they're just a coach who takes charge of set pieces. We'll come on to.
Some have better PR than others.
Exactly. But Arsenal have basically went, well, instead of looking at like only 2 of 100 goals that we score are set pieces, 2 or 3, if we can move that to 6 or 7, if we can push those boundaries when other teams aren't, that is one more thing that we can use to our advantage. So set piece is very much a game within a game. As I was saying there, I was speaking to someone who works at a club recently. They were saying that as you say, some set-piece coaches have better PR than others. Yeah. Some are hired as set-piece coaches, Nicholas Jover at Arsenal, Austin McPhee at Aston Villa. There's been Arsenal-Aston Villa games where the camera's been as much on them two as it has the managers, which is a bit overblown. And some will not be designated set-piece coaches. They'll be a little bit little bit quieter. Chelsea hired Brentford's a couple of years ago, for example. And maybe they're just coaches with a special who specifically focus on set pieces. But really, what it comes down to, this person was saying to me, is how much time is in preference and priority is it given in training? Are set pieces a chore for this coach, or is it an obsession that allows them to come up with that extra routine? What are they like, and how do they communicate with players? How long have they been doing it? So really, although that 25% number of goals scored in the Premier League being set pieces has dropped a little bit since those opening 5 match days, there's still a 2 or 3% increase on even last season alone. It's something that clubs can control. It is one more thing to push to your advantage. And similarly to recruitment, in modern football, the best run clubs make all these small things work to their advantage to have a big happy picture, which Rangers obviously haven't had in a while.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that I wanted to bring up to you as far as the set-piece coaches go, because a lot of modern football fans and maybe look at the set-piece coach as a new age thing, a thing that something younger fans like us just accept and just think is normally part of the game.
You were going to say woke.
Yes, I was going to say that, woke. But we'll steer clear of that with other connotations. But you would never... Well, some fans might turn their nose up at that.
Yeah.
You would never turn your nose up at a striking coach. You wouldn't turn your nose up at a defensive coach. But now it seems that is just holding quite as much weight as any of these other things that we would consider the norm.
Exactly. And there's even been throwing coaches. And again, people might look at that and think, what's the point of that? But there's 50 throw-ins a game or 60 throw-ins a game. So again, if you can make a 1 or 2% advantage in all of these different areas, logic suggests it's going to be to your benefit. You're right. If Danny Rule or any other, and this is off the news that Chris was reporting on Friday, that Rangers are looking to add the specialist. If Danny Rule had been looking to add a defensive specialist or a striker coach, no one would really bat an eyelid. And I think there will be generally pretty positive reaction to something like this because, as we'll come on to discuss, Rangers could do with addressing this area given what their output's been like in the last couple of years. But yeah, all clubs are doing it, and maybe as we can speak about now, Rangers have always had a coach designated to set pieces, but they had so many different managers, so many different structures. They've had no real time to build when they have had success in the past, and as a result, we'll maybe just throw up our first chart of the day. We won't have too many. Rangers scored the fewest set piece goals in the Scottish Premiership last season. Now they were joint with Celtic. That's terrible.
Yeah,
Hibs scored 18, which is more than double of Rangers' 8. That just goes to show you, if imagine where Rangers could have been in the table if they'd managed 18 set piece goals instead of 8.
Yeah.
As an example,
you look at that there, and you realise how ineffectual Rangers have managed to be at these controlled situations that managers always look at. Where you speak to managers and they talk about controlling these controllable aspects of the game, and set pieces really does seem to be one of these. If we look at Rangers in general, who's really been in charge of the set pieces for the last few years, and how has that changed? How has their relationship changed with having a set piece coach, not having a set piece coach? How does that look over the previous years?
Yeah, well, there's been 4 or 5 different coaches in charge of set pieces. Again, are they set piece coaches? Probably the success of Rangers' relative success in that season tells you yes or no.
Yeah.
So you had Tom Culshaw, who departed with Steven Gerrard in 2021. Rangers were pretty good at set pieces under Steven Gerrard. Then you had Roy Mackay under Giovanni Van Bronckhorst, Harry Watling under Michael Beale, which is actually when Rangers have had their best set piece return in the last kind of 3 or 4 years, as we'll come on to show. Rangers scored 21 set-piece league goals the 22-23 season, which includes quite a few direct free kicks, but nonetheless, that is very high. So if we look at Rangers set-piece goals per season, Blair, from the 2021-22 season, which is after... Was that after the road to Seville? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It seems just ages ago now. Giovanni Van Bronckhorst's first full season in charge then.
Yeah.
So you have 17 goals in that season, pretty good. And that's, Beale obviously comes in midway through the season, which is when Watling is in charge of set pieces. And we actually interviewed him on the Rangers Review this year, or maybe last year, and he had a great quote, I thought, which he said he'd stolen at the time, that set pieces should be your top scorer.
Yeah.
Your number 9 might get injured, who you spend a lot of money on, But as you're identifying there, it's something you can control. You're one of the best resource teams in the league. You should be one of the best performing teams in that league. We'll come on to size of the team and how that maybe impacts things. But 21 goals after 17 goals the season before. Pretty good, 38 all in all. Then comes the fall. And as we'll actually discover in a minute when we speak about the underlying numbers, in 2023-24, when Philippe Clement was in charge, and he was the set-piece coach, because he said, Stefan van der Heyden, I believe, did some of the work, but Clement said in that press conference, I basically want control set pieces because I like them.
Yeah.
So Rangers only scored 9 goals in that season. However, their underlying numbers were a bit better. The underlying numbers say they should have scored about 16 goals from set pieces, but their finishing was poor. You're going to have that variance. Strikers over and underperform their expected goals, the context of the game. But the higher that you kind of keep your chance creation, the less likely that number is to fall to a number like 9. And then last season, Rangers only scored 8 goals from set pieces. They didn't score a set-piece goal until Boxing Day, December 26th, which is mental. So if you look at them scoring 38 goals in those 2 seasons, 21, 22 and 22, 23, that fell to, 17 goals in the 2 seasons after? So we'll look at the underlying numbers and how there's maybe a bit of variance there, but generally they follow what the trend is there, that since a real designated set-piece coach in Watling and Culshaw and even Roy Mackay taking responsibility, because on the road to Seville, Rangers were good at set-pieces, Dortmund away, Braga at home, another one maybe that I can't think of. But since then, it's been a bit of a weakness, and as we'll come on to discuss as well this season, particularly defensively, Rangers have been conceding a lot of chances.
Yeah, before we get into the defensive side of this, and there's an interesting point you make there, that when Rangers have had a specialised set-piece coach and somebody, there's a difference between somebody who takes training sessions for set pieces and someone who is actually a set-piece coach. And I think that this is an important distinction to make, because as the game becomes bigger, as the job of a manager becomes bigger, of course, Philippe Clement came out and said that quite clearly, that he had things on his desk that no manager should ever have on his desk. And it seems as though it needs to be more delegation. They have to spread this responsibility around a little bit. And I make the comparison now that a lot of football with these set-piece coaches, it almost becomes a bit like American football, like you see in the NFL. Like you see almost like a playbook. You see like set-piece coaches coming up with these routines, with these interesting ways of approaching corners, approaching free kicks. And that is a job in itself. And I think that takes a lot more than just a manager at the end of a training session going, all right, lads, we're going to do corners. Because the days of whipping it into the mixer are seem to be dying out, especially at elite level football. Now, I'll caveat that by saying that for better or worse, it's not for me to sit here and say that the game is getting better because of it. I actually think that because of things like this, the game is getting a lot slower. I think it's harder to watch in many ways because it is so broken up, because it's not quite as free flowing in that sense. I mean, anyone that's apologies to all NFL fans out there, but anyone who's watched full 4 hours of an American football game know that it is not a free-flowing exercise the same way that 90 minutes of football is. It's just a completely different watching experience altogether, and personal tastes, but
commercialism.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And football almost seems to be going down that road a little bit when you're watching these set pieces and everybody stops and draws a collective breath before Arsenal take a corner, because you're thinking, oh, what are they going to do here? You know, and that this season anyway is yielding some success, so you can understand why Rangers and other teams like them are going, okay, how can we follow that model? Let's get a designated coach in to come up with these ideas.
Yeah, so like Arteta probably knows more about football than Nicholas Jover, his set-piece coach, but he probably doesn't have the time, maybe doesn't have the same enthusiasm. It's a different voice. Clement, when he first came in, again, we'll throw up a graphic in a moment which gives a bit of context to this, but the numbers actually stayed pretty good in terms of not the goals they were scoring, but the chances they were creating. Because, again, set pieces, like any striker, you go through better streaks and worse streaks with it. But it's no coincidence that when these small little differences start to tail off is the following season, when there's no CEO, there's no chairman, Clement's so he doesn't have the time to invest in set pieces, exactly to your point. And also a set piece coach can create a bit of, I think, like we've spoken a lot about managers being salesmen this season, Nicholas Jover could tell Arsenal players to do anything from set pieces, and they'll do it. They'll work harder in training on it. They'll have more conviction. They'll believe in it because they can see the output of the idea. If you've got the same manager telling you the same thing, I don't think that's necessarily that healthy.
Yeah, I think so. I think if you have those different voices, if you have those different ideas, if you have someone to come in and look at it a bit fresher, then I definitely think that helps. If we look at this, the data that pans out in terms of expected goals and how this manifests itself as far as set pieces go, what does this tell us over the past few years in terms of Rangers' chance creation with their set pieces?
Yeah, so all this is doing, again, expected goals, just the value of chances created. If anyone is allergic to that little phrase, I know some are. All this is doing is taking the average chances created from set pieces over the past 5 seasons, including this season. So you can see generally it's and in this graph, Blair, the bigger the better. In the next graph, you want to forget that, but in this graph, the bigger the better.
I always like it when you explain graphs to me in simple terms.
Yeah, and this has nothing to do with goals or finishing. This is just the value of chances that is being created.
These are big opportunities that Rangers are making.
Yeah. So in terms of how this ranked compared to the rest of the league, if we look at 21-22, Rangers had the highest chance creation from set pieces compared to the rest of the league. The next season, the second highest, 22-23. The next season, the second highest again, 23-24, which is really interesting because they only scored 9 goals, but their finishing was pretty poor.
Yeah.
But under the hood, they should have been doing better.
With better players. And again, as we always speak about, these graphs and these numbers are just symptomatic of what you're actually seeing on the park. So Rangers with better strikers should have been scoring more goals.
Or a bit more luck, or when did it happen in games? But the point is, they still had the second highest expected goals from set pieces. Then last season it goes to 7th,
which is a major drop off.
Again, it's when Clement has all this stuff around him, but maybe he's also not delegating. Maybe it's a smaller team, and Rangers don't score a set piece goal until Christmas.
And to bring that back into real world terms, if you remember at that point where these numbers really do seem to plummet, there is direct correlation between that point where Philippe Clement is out in the press conferences saying, I'm doing everything here.
Yeah.
He's coming out saying, I need help.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a whole other conversation about why that maybe.
But it's interesting how the numbers actually back up that point. They're quantifiable evidence that one man can't do it all.
And also Celtic scored 8 set piece goals last season, like Rangers, the worst in the league. Again, if Rangers had managed to keep that level high, maybe if they'd, recruited a little bit more with set pieces in mind, because that's again something Arsenal have apparently done. When you look at a player like, I think Mikel Merino was the example used in the article I read. Or maybe it's they appoint a coach that summer to specifically take charge of set pieces. If you can keep that chance creation at a 0.43 instead of 0.3, instead of taking a third or a quarter off your overall total, then maybe that reflects in your points. And interestingly, it stayed the same this season. So the chance creation is pretty poor, and it's not been great across the league. But that's just the kind of noise of finishing. Sometimes you finish chances like Finlay Curtis's goal away at St Mirren that derived from a set piece.
Yeah.
He doesn't score every single one of those because it's a hard chance. Nico Raskin at the front post against Dundee, he doesn't always score that because sometimes the goalkeeper saves it, sometimes it goes just over the bar. So the point is, if you want to keep your set piece expected goals, like your expected goals in general, as high as possible because it allows for a little bit of volume.
Yeah.
And since basically Rangers didn't have a designated set piece coach, they had a little bit of a sustained run under Clement where things were still good even if they weren't scoring. But since the summer of 2024, things have absolutely nosedived. And if we move forward to the chances they're conceding, it's a similar story.
Yeah, this is it from a defensive perspective, so this is the opposite.
So here, the last chart was bigger the better. This chart is the smaller the better.
Okay.
If you see a big line, run.
Okay.
And Rangers this season have quite a big line there. So how did the set piece expected goals conceded? Just the chances Rangers are conceding from corners and free kicks and throw-ins. How did that rank in all these corresponding seasons? So in 2021-22, it was the best. They were conceding the fewest chances.
So they had the lowest amount of chances conceded per set piece.
Per game.
Yeah.
2022-23, they come in second, so only one team is conceding fewer chances. 23-24, again, that season of Beale and Clement, they're first. So that actually shows what under Clement initially they weren't conceding many chances, and that bore out in their defensive performance. Then last season it goes to third. So it's not as good as it was, but still only 2 teams are conceding fewer opportunities from set pieces. It's not quite as bad as their attacking performance. And then this season, it goes to the 9th worst total in the division. Yeah. So now, so far this season, only 3 teams are conceding more from Rangers at set pieces. That's borne out in the Europa League 2, where I think it's only 5 teams have conceded more from set pieces in a 36-team league.
And I think that's something that everyone can see. If you remember back to the early parts of the season, watching the defender under Russell Martin, it would not surprise anyone to see that Rangers were one of the weakest teams statistically and on the eye test at set pieces.
Yeah, exactly. So both those underlying numbers basically support the theory that since certainly Clement's last full season and the overhang of having a set-piece specialist designated who led to a lot more goals being scored. Again, the top-line numbers, she had 38 goals scored in the 2 seasons after winning the league. After the road to Seville. And then the 2 seasons after that, he had only 17, well under half. That is borne out in the underlying numbers. That explains why Danny Rule wants a set-piece coach. Yeah. He needs someone designated as an area where his team can improve, and maybe finally we can just look at, have we seen any improvements in an attacking sense, not defensively, because I think you see, again, borne out in that data, a real weakness there, but offensively, have we seen a few different tweaks and alterations that maybe suggest that, of course, Danny Rule is already thinking about this before, if and when they do get someone who is designed to just work on set pieces.
Yeah, because I know you've picked out a couple of examples here that kind of prove to us, or hint to us anyway, that Danny Rule has seen this as a potential opportunity and a potential underutilised aspect of this Rangers team about where they can get some success. So that the first one here we'll bring up is Nicholas Raskin's opening goal against Dundee last weekend, where he wins that header. And Raskin's a little bit of an anomaly because we talk about Rangers not being a physical side, not being a tall side. He's maybe one of the smallest players in the Rangers squad, but probably the most dangerous from headers.
Yeah, and interestingly, a lot of, not really got time to go into this, but and some people will be thankful because this might be a particularly boring point, Blair, but jumping ability is much more important than actual how tall you are.
Yeah,
when it comes to attacking. When it comes to attacking set pieces or just attacking the ball in the air on the pitch. And Raskin epitomises that because he's probably one of Rangers' smallest players, but he's their biggest threat from set pieces. Now, we've seen him score this type of goal before. We've seen him make these runs before. But I thought this was maybe a slight alteration, which I just wanted to look at very quickly. So what you see here from this set piece is Raskin is at the front post. He's quite static initially before the cross comes in. You can see 3 players at the back post for Rangers, which is Miovski, Cornelius and Suter. They're being blocked, not being marked, they're being blocked because Dundee are in this zonal setup. The reason teams generally use a zonal setup is because it's a lesser of 2 evils. They think it's better to be controlled, even if we might lose a marker, than just go man for man and be a bit more susceptible to blocking and being pulled apart the pitch and not protecting the most valuable positions. So that's why you see, you don't see Dundee's number 5 marking John Suter, the biggest on the biggest.
Yeah, but Dundee are essentially backing themselves to cover as much of the box as possible that Rangers can move wherever they like, and they'll have it covered. Exactly,
it's a trade-off. There's notice the Rafa Benitez saying about tactics: the blanket either covers your feet or your head. Have you heard this one?
Can't have both.
Can't have both. There's no perfect tactic. So then what teams will do in response is, you can see the Dundee blockers at the edge. What teams will do in response is they'll have smaller players like Nico Raskin or Mikey Moore to try and block the strongest Dundee headers of the ball. So both teams are trying to impede the opposition's aerially dominant players to allow their teammates to get a good run onto the ball. So Raskin is chronically undermarked for his size, but again, often we see him running from the edge of the box, and I thought this was I think this has happened before, but it's just a nice set piece to discuss anyway. Maybe an example of this is like using Raskin as a decoy player. If we move on to the next slide, because I think Dundee think, he's maybe going to try and block, and actually he just steps on and gets a free run in a way that maybe a Suter or Cornelius wouldn't have, because they seem bigger, so they seem more of a threat, and that he scores the header. And much like the game at home to Kilmarnock, Derek Cornelius' header, which we'll look at briefly, that's so important in the context of the game. If you just look at the wider context of Rangers trying to break down teams, Rangers trying to win away from home, one of the reasons that they've been so poor at that in recent years is because the opposition has generally been more dangerous at set pieces than them, which just gives them a huge leg up, especially in a physical game like Scottish football, where at points it might be harder to win the game outfield than in these kind of games within games, which set pieces are often branded.
Yeah, and if we move on to that Derek Cornelius goal against Kilmarnock here, we just talk you through this. He starts very, very deep, not in the box, not in that area where defenders will be jostling, they'll be grabbing each other, where they might not get that free run.
Yeah.
This is a very deliberate action. It's a very, okay, you start on this edge of the box and you follow, as you can see in that line that I've got on the screen there, you follow that run round into towards the penalty spot, and you marry that with the idea that James Tavernier is good enough to find them, and then you yield success, as we look into the second frame here, that Derek Cornelius has picked himself out into space and James Tavernier finds him. Meanwhile, he's managed to evade all the jostling in the middle of the area.
Exactly. So if we just consult the data back a second in our mind, that Rangers, the team is generally not as physical, I think we'd agree, on the eye compared to a couple of years ago. And I don't think that always means you can't score from set pieces, because you can be clever. You can play it short, you can manipulate the opposition's defender, you can try and get second contact. As long as you're not just hitting it into the box and hoping for the best, there's always opportunity. But when you're defending, that's what I think we've seen this season, your physicality is probably isolated because the opposition will look at you and go, we're more physical. It's on our terms because it's our set piece.
Yeah,
so
they're setting the tone because they're making the set piece.
Exactly. So this from Cornelius is just something we've seen a little bit more under Danny Rule, where the argument against him being out here is that he's further away from goal and you need to time your run perfectly onto the ball. But a Kilmarnock player probably isn't going to jump out and mark him because, again, they're in their zonal structure thinking it's a greater risk for us to go out there, because then if Kilmarnock take their best defender out of their most dangerous zone to mark Cornelius, what's to say James Tavernier doesn't put the ball in the head of someone else? We've seen John Souttar score that disallowed goal in the Old Firm from a similar position. But when Cornelius does time his run perfectly onto the ball, he's got a free header. It's well worked. It's a little bit inventive. It's a little bit unpredictable. And if you look at tons of Arsenal are the hallmark for this. If you look at tons of their set pieces, you'll have Gabriel like starting at the back post and making these strange looking runs, or Julian Timber. But it's all about timing, remaining unpredictable, and crucially getting a run on your opponent instead of, as you say, being in the middle and jostling and then maybe not being able to rise for the set piece because you've got your direct markers pulling your arm.
Yeah.
So that's a good example. And if we just move on to the final slide, this isn't a goal. It should have probably been a goal. Yusuf Chermiti in the League Cup semi-final. Again, very similar. You can just see with this, the point we raise it is Danny Rule's clearly trying to do something a little bit different. Looking at the opponent, where are they weak? Do they use a zonal setup? So can we put our dominant striker of the ball to the back? Or if Liam Scales then goes out and joins Chermiti at the back post, can we call Celtic's bluff and play it into the middle?
Yeah.
It didn't work on that day. It probably should have, because Tavernier plays a perfect ball in. But again, I think you've seen in really each of Rangers' games so far, under Danny Rule, they're trying to do something a little bit different from set pieces. And although it's early days, a couple of important goals seems to suggest they're heading in the right direction, even if defensively, as the data shows, that's still a big concern and something that they need to address.
Yeah, you look at that Celtic one just on that frame there. Yusuf Chermiti is chronically undermarked at the back post, and that's deliberate. And it's deliberate to peel him out there, because, like you said, it would take a big gutsy call from Celtic to go, okay, let's pull Liam Scales out of that pack, like we keep talking about, that middle of the jostling area, the defenders. Let's pull him out, put him on Yusuf Chermiti. Then you're just giving James Tavernier invitation to drop that ball in at the front post, because you've got one of your centre halves that's too far away. Well, we've certainly moved on from the days of Sir Alex Ferguson saying he's never seen a zone score a goal. This is all very much more intricate, and I think it gives a little bit of an insight into why Danny Rule is taking it quite so seriously, and why Rangers, if we expect him to be looking to bring a set piece coach into his backroom staff. So, Josh, thanks very much for joining us today and talking us through all this. We'll be back next weekend to discuss more of the big talking points within Rangers, both on and off the park. But from me and Josh this morning, thanks for watching and thanks for listening.